Good morning and welcome. Thanks for joining me for our webinar on continuing to focus on cultural transformation. So what did I call it that? I've been looking at what's trending and what's going on in the world around us, and still a lot of conversation going on about cultural transformation and the importance of having a healthy culture. And so I didn't want to actually just call it creating or cultural transformation, because we've been focusing on that for a while now. I was a member of a group of CEOs that used to meet monthly. I've sort of retired from that now, but there was always speakers coming in to talk about transforming organizational culture and creating a healthy culture. But what I noticed was that many of the CEOs talked about it and talked about how important it was, but they really didn't do much to actually change the culture in any way. And I think partly because people aren't really sure, well, what do we mean by cultural transformation? And what is organizational culture? So I thought I'd start off with that question. And one of the authors that I've read quite a lot of, and I'm sure you have as well, Brene Brown, and I'll just bring up a picture of the lovely Brene. She's based in Houston, in Texas. And she's an academic, but she's also a brilliant speaker. If you haven't seen any of her videos, I'd certainly go to YouTube and do a bit of a search on Brene Brown. And she specializes in vulnerability and the importance of being vulnerable. And she's got a fantastic 17-minute video that she's done that you can access. But she defines culture as a set of values and behaviors that guide how people work together in an organization. Another way I've heard her describe it is it's just the way we do things around here. All right. And so what is the way that we do things around here? And have we defined what that should be? What are the values and behaviors that we need everyone in the organization to operate by if we're going to have the kind of culture that we want here? All right. And while thinking about culture, I was also reminded of one of my other favorite resources on culture, I guess you could call it that, is the book Good to Great. All right. And those of you that have read the book, and I'm sure many of you have, that Jim Collins is a well-known researcher and author. And in this book, he looked at organizations that had been good and then made a leap to becoming great, and great being producing returns to shareholders more than 3 times the average for the stock market. All right, so that's a significant leap. And then they sustained that leap for 15 years. So that's how you qualified to be a great company. And what was interesting there was that, and you've all heard the quote, I'm sure, that the leaders of the great companies first got the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and then got the right people in the right seats before figuring out where to drive it. All right. And yet many people think things in reverse. So we've got to first of all figure out our strategy and what our vision is and where we're going and what our strategy should be before we decide on the people. But if you've got the right people on the bus, you can change direction. If we're halfway to the destination we thought we should go to, and then we figure out that that's not really, the world's changed around us. We need to go in a different direction here. If you've got the right people, it's fairly easy to change direction because you know the right people are going to help you create a great organization. Okay. And so the other thing that Brene used the term values, and in Good to Great, Jim Collins also says the right people are the people with the right values, more so than the people with the right qualifications. Okay. And so I thought I'd remind you of a well-known Intégro model, the whole person concept. And I'm not going to go through it in any detail here, other than just to remind you of it. Because we use this because DISC, or everything DISC, is a needs-driven behavioral model. You've heard me say that 1,000 times. And I'll keep on saying it because the behavioral style of people exhibit in the tip of the iceberg is they're using behaviors that satisfy their psychological needs at the bottom of the iceberg, okay? But where do values fit in? See, values are sort of towards the bottom of the iceberg. I see values or beliefs as thoughts that became a fact. All right. You heard something, you read something, someone told you something, and you thought about it and you said, you know what? That's true. I really believe that's true. Right now, it's not just a thought, it's a belief. And we make our decisions about how we should live our life based on the beliefs that we have about how we should live our life, what's right and what's wrong, what we should or shouldn't do. Okay. So they're pretty deep seated. And so, in an organizational context and culture context, what we need is people in the organization sharing the same kind of values about how we should operate. And so what I'm going to focus on today is what are the wily tools that we have here at Intégro that I know most of you are using, at least one or some of the wily tools, but how do they fit with creating the kind of healthy culture that you want? And so I'm going to start off with a poll, and Sue is helping me out here. Sue's going to put up a poll for you to respond to. But first of all, here are some words that I've come up with that I would define as values. They fit into that deeper down in the iceberg kind of thing. And we're going to ask you to click on the values that you believe are important for organizations to create a healthy culture. Okay, so here's the poll, and you can click on, I think, as many as you like. You can click on 6, more than, I can click on more than one. Okay. Oh, here we go. Do you see the people are starting to respond now? So just click on responsibility is obviously important, yes. And we've got respect is coming up pretty strongly for everybody, isn't it? Right. Imagine working in an organization where respect is not highly desirable, okay, where people don't respect each other. Okay. And so here we go. We're really building up a list here. And we got respect is leading the pack, closely followed by being accountable. Okay, yeah, and yeah, okay. So let's just end the poll there and let's look at the results. Share results. Okay, so I'm not sure what you can see, but it looks like respect came in at 88% of people chose respect, 82% accountable, 59 responsible, or down the bottom of the page here, trustworthy, 76%. That's no surprise, is it? Okay. And so, and even honesty only came in at 35%, which is not to say it's not important, but I think honesty comes out lower on some of these lists because people see that as a given. And we want to really focus on some of the other things. Okay, thanks for doing that. Okay, and we'll just stop sharing that. Okay, and go back to here. So what I want to look at is look at what are the tools that Wiley has that we have at your disposal for training people to operate by the values and beliefs that we need to operate by, developing people's talents, and also hiring, getting the right people in the right seats. Okay, and I'm going to start with DISC because that's the most obvious place to start. And this is my DISC map. And those of you that are familiar with the Everything DISC profile, which is possibly most of you, this is the workplace profile DISC map. And you can see where my dot sits there. I'm an SI. And the shading there indicates that I'm pretty comfortable operating in the majority of the I and the S quadrants, and flow over into D a little bit of green shading there and a little bit of yellow shading in the C quadrant. And I've got extra stripes on the action priority up the top there. Okay, so when we're completing the assessment for Everything DISC, we have the base questions that measure where my dot sits. And then there are additional set of different questions that are measuring the priority. So you answer questions about each of the 8 priorities to determine how important they are. Now, for the vast majority of people, the 3 priorities that they're allocated because of where their dot sits, in my case, collaboration, support, and enthusiasm, turn out to be the ones that they score highest in the questions that are measuring priorities. And in some cases, roughly 30% of people have one additional priority, like I have here on action. Okay, 3% of people can have 2 additional priorities. They might have up to 5 priorities, but there's only 3% of people that get the 2 additional priorities. But 30% roughly get one additional priority as something a bit more than. Then there's no good or bad about having 5 priorities versus 4 priorities versus 3. But if you think about it, if you've got people working in a team and they've got very different priorities, like I'm working with someone who's a DC style, who's got a very high priority on challenge, and my highest priority is on collaboration. So I'm trying to collaborate and they're trying to challenge what they're hearing me say because they want to question everything, because they like to know what's behind everything. Okay, so if we understand each other's priorities as well as understanding each other's disc styles, we've got a better understanding of why people are responding the way they are. And then we've got to also look at these priorities perhaps as things that we need to look at in terms of our culture. All right. If we're going to respect different priorities, then that's a good starting point. We need to better understand those different priorities. Okay. Now, the latest iteration of everything disc is Catalyst. All right. And I'm hoping that most of you have had the opportunity to do a Catalyst profile. It's a new online platform. When I say new, it's actually 5 years old coming up, isn't it? 2020. Catalyst was launched, I think if I remember correctly, in May of 2020. And you may also recall that COVID hit in around March of 2020. All right. And Wiley had already been working on developing the Catalyst platform, so where people can see the disc profile online as opposed to in a PDF file. And they accelerated the release of Catalyst because of COVID, right? And some of you may remember the very early days of Catalyst where there were a few bugs, but it was made sense for people who were having to work from home to operate remotely, to be able to see more about each other and communicate more with each other in an online platform. And hence Catalyst became reality. And that's where all of Wiley's research and development is going now, is in this Catalyst platform. And so let's dive into that. And just one of the most valuable things about Catalyst is the tiles you see on the right-hand side there. Part of our Intégro team. And we can see there a tile, we were able to scroll down. I'm not live in Catalyst, so I can't do that, but we'd be able to scroll down and see other members of the Intégro team. And this being my profile that I was in, it's not actually, it's Pammy's, you can see over on the left. Pammy has an eye style. So Pammy could click on any one of those other tiles and pull up a comparison between herself and any other team member. All right. And one of the first questions that often comes up when we start showing this to people is people saying, well, what if people don't want other people to be able to see their profile? Well, in actual fact, if Pammy clicked on one of those tiles, she is not going to see the other person's profile. Yes, you can see where their dot sits, but you'll see things like, say, for example, if we chose Louise here, and see what Louise cares about, what's important to her, right? The second thing we would see is when you should pull Louise into a meeting, because these are the strengths that Louise can contribute to the discussions that you're having. And don't do these things because these things might stress Louise out a bit, okay? So, you know, I don't know about you, but if I'm working with a group of people, I'd like them to know what I care about. I'd certainly like them to know what I'm good at and when they could perhaps pull me into a discussion because of the strengths that I've got. And I really would like them to know the kinds of things that might stress me as well, so that they choose not to do that. Why would they choose to do something that would stress me? Okay. And so that's one of the first things I think we need to be aware of about Catalyst is, although you can see everyone else on your team who has given you approval to see them, you can only see the things that make a difference in the relationship and where you sit. We'll look at some continua in just a moment to elaborate on that a little bit more. Okay. Now the other thing is that anyone who's got their profile in Catalyst can turn off other people's ability to see a comparison with them, all right? So they can go into the privacy mode and choose to remain private. Now, if they did that, you can see the picture there of the 6 people on this team. If, for example, Louise had chosen to not let other people see her comparisons, Louise's tile there would be grayed out, all right? So she wouldn't disappear out of the system, but other members of the team could see that Louise doesn't want to be sharing her comparisons. Now, Louise, if she did that, would also see everybody else grayed out in her your colleague section. She wouldn't be able to actually see the comparisons of anyone else. So, but then of course, Louise could also just go in and switch it back on and make it available. So the reason I'm saying this is that there's no downside of people being able to see where you sit in relation to each other. There's only a plus side to it. Obviously, I'm biased, but that's the way I see it. Okay, so the other part of Catalyst, which is a bit newer, you'll see at the bottom of the screen there, build a group. If we go into the group section, okay, and here's the Intégro group on the right-hand side there, the group map. And there's a total of 10 people in that group, okay? And you can see that Alicia is out there on her own up in the D quadrant. And we saw Pammy, she's in the I quadrant, and everybody else sits somewhere in the S quadrant, okay? There are 3 of us bunched together there, Tris, myself, and Mel in the SI area. Louise is in the S quadrant, and we've got a group of SCs there too, with Sue and Kelly. And also we've got Jackie in the SI area as well. So we didn't hire people because they were S's. We attracted people because the SI people like giving support, and I would hope to think that you have a good opinion about the support that we provide here at Intégro, and you can see why, because everybody is very focused on providing support. As you can see, support is the #1 priority of the S style, okay? And so that's the first thing we can see in the group function is where everybody sits. We can also then look at the 8 continua that show up in the Your Colleague section and see where everybody in the team sits on each of the 8 continua. Now here we've got private outgoing, and as you can see, there's a bunch of us that are very outgoing and a bunch of us that are fairly private. No one very private, okay? And so what do we do with this? Well, we can actually just sit together as a team and we can look at this that's up on a slide or something and say, well, how does this show up in the way we work together, okay? And the fair chance that people the further towards the right end of the scale might like to talk a fair bit, okay? And the others who are more private might like to just get on with the job, all right? So we might need to be a little bit more conscious of that. And pretty much everybody likes to have a bit of a conversation, and we're a very social group as it is. But we can actually go through each of those continua. Now, there's some specific applications around that, and I'm just going to take you into the conversation starters, all right, which is in the Your Groups area, okay? And there are 3 conversation starters in the program at the moment. Get to know your team, make decisions together, communicate clearly are the 3 conversation starters. So the idea of this is that the team can get together just at a team meeting and say, well, let's have a look at how where we sit on those continua affects the way we make decisions together. All right, so we would click on that and it would take us into 2 of the continua. I'm just going to go back to this one here, and it'll ask each person on the team to look at where they sit on this continua and is that accurate? Do you think that's a good fit for where you sit? And most people are going to say, yeah, that fits me pretty well. Okay. Well, how does that, where your position on this continua affect the way we make decisions together? Okay. And so there are a series of 3 questions in the conversation starters for each of 2 different continua for the team members to have a conversation about the topic that they chose. All right. So there's a lot of application being built into Catalyst now. And there's, I don't think I had a slide on here about getting advice, but that's one of the newest functions. And I think maybe if I go back to the beginning, no, it's not going to show me there, I don't think. No, there's a new tile at the beginning of the Catalyst profile where getting advice, and you could click on get advice and it will ask you for a team member's name, and it'll find that team member, and then you'll choose a topic that you would like to get advice on how to relate to this person, and it'll come up with some tips for you and how to approach that person. All right, so that's available to anybody who's got a Catalyst profile to get advice on how to better relate to, communicate with other members of their team. Okay. All right, now the Everything Desk application library is still there. Agile EQ, which is the emotional intelligence assessment. Well, it's not actually an assessment of emotional intelligence. It's a measure of your emotional intelligence strengths. And it ties that in with the DISC model as well. If you haven't had a look at the Agile EQ profile, I'd strongly recommend it. It's one that you can use with anyone. Like with the management profile, ideally you would mainly use that with managers. Okay. Likewise, work of leaders, you would work leaders, sales profile you use with salespeople. But the Agile EQ profile is something that you can use with anyone at any level of the organization. And it's an actual great follow-on to use with people who've done the workplace profile. Okay. I mentioned before, in addition to workplace, in Catalyst, you've got Agile EQ and you've also got the management profile. All right. And the other profiles are not going to go into Catalyst. It's just going to remain the three, but there are more applications coming in the Catalyst platform. And there'll be more news about that in the very near future. Okay. All right. So I want to just move on to one of our other tools. And we're going to talk about 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. And that comes from Patrick Lencioni. And this, I just want to start off with this graphic. This is from Patrick's book, The Advantage, where he talks about organizational health and how do you create a healthy organization. And he says you start off with building a cohesive leadership team. And that makes sense. We want the leadership team that's leading the organization, that's creating the culture to be cohesive. And then we need to create clarity, overcommunicate clarity, and reinforce clarity. And a big part of what we need to reinforce there is the values. Okay, so just a quick review of the 5 dysfunctions model. This is the book that has sold, I think it's up around 4 million copies now, and they're still selling very effectively, very successfully out there. And you see it in bookstores all the time as out in front where people can see it. So it's still getting a lot of attention. Okay. So the absence of trust leads to a fear of conflict, which leads to a lack of commitment, which leads to avoidance of accountability, which leads to an inattention to results and a very dysfunctional team. And so the 5 behaviors program flips that around and says, okay, we need to build trust rather than avoid trust. All right. And to do that, we've got to actually engage in conflict around ideas. We've got to communicate in a healthy and constructive, unfiltered way. All right. Because only then can we commit to the decisions that are made, because we know that everybody's voiced their opinion. And when everybody's committed to the decision, we obviously know we can hold each other accountable because we've all committed to the decision. And then obviously we're going to be all focused on achieving those collective results. Okay. And it's not just a teamwork model, right? It's an actual way of working together. And let me give you an example. We had a member of our team some years ago now who had his own views about the sales process and how he should keep records about his contact with clients and stuff like that. And he just didn't want to use the systems that we had here at Intégro. And so we talk about it and he'd agree to do it, but then he'd turn around and not do it. And it came clear to me that he wasn't committed to the decision that he made or the agreement that he made to do it. He basically nod his head and say, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he'd go off and do his own thing. And when I challenged him on that and I said, I need to talk to you about commitment, your commitment to the things that we've discussed in the past. And he said, I'm committed. I'm absolutely committed to Intégro and all that kind of stuff. But he wasn't committed to the decision. And it was this model that helped us to really make that clear. And in order to get that commitment, we needed to go back to the conflict stage. All right. We needed to have the unfiltered, robust conversation that we hadn't had, and him actually agree to the fact that he didn't commit to it and he wasn't going to commit to it, and in which case he needed to find somewhere else to work, which he eventually did, and didn't come out as a result of that directly. But so it actually is a tool that helped us to diagnose where the problem was. And then we can, if we've got a lack of commitment, we've got to go and engage in conflict. And if we're having trouble engaging in conflict, we've got to go back to being trusting each other and being vulnerable with each other and being willing to really speak up. Okay. So then we can actually move on to achieve all steps in the 5 behaviors model. Okay. So the profile itself, the 5 behaviors profile has a team assessment as well as your DISC profile built into it. All right. So this is an example of the team questions. These are the 4 questions that we use to measure vulnerability-based trust. And so team members are answering these questions prior to the team session coming together, right? And so this provides valuable information for the team to see the reasons why they're having difficulty building a higher level of trust. In this case, you can see the team members acknowledge their weaknesses to one another. It doesn't score very highly, barely even at sometimes on that. Okay, so that's the value of this particular assessment, is it's actually identifying what the team needs to work on for them to become much more cohesive. And then, of course, built into the profile, we also have the DISC model. So here is the team's DISC profiles represented by each team member's initials. All right, and we actually can discuss how is this showing up in the team. And then this is a really valuable, powerful part of the program. These are culture questions that we can actually, the team members identify things that are getting in the road of the team building trust. So this is a specific additional part of the assessment where the rubber really hits the road. All right, we can see here that 7 out of 9 team members have said there'd be more trust if team members were more forthright with information. 5 people said admitted their mistakes, and so on. Okay, so there's obviously some things that are going to come out of this where the team needs to get down to the nitty-gritty of discussing what do we need to do to become more effective and to really trust each other. And then again, the conflict module. This is a great tool where people can see the unhealthy behaviors during conflict and the healthy behaviors during conflict, and which of those do I use? And we can see that it's tied into DISC styles. It isn't always necessarily so. I've had a person with a DI style who says, well, in conflict with my wife, I tend to cave in to avoid tension, which is something more an S style would be supposed to do. But obviously, with his wife, his DI style just doesn't work. And so he switches to something else. Okay. I'm just sharing this with you so that you can see that behind the scenes in these assessments, this is all about building a teamwork-based culture. And to do that, we've got to have that trust, and we've got to be able to engage in healthy conflict. Okay. And so there's 2 versions of 5 behaviors program. There's the team development program, and that's the one where we measure the team. And as you can see, this example here shows a team that's low in trust, accountability, and results, and medium in conflict and commitment. They're not high in anything. So the goal would ultimately be, over a period of time, that you would turn all of those into green. Okay. And we actually have an assessment that can measure that. So, and that's the progress report. All right. So 3 to 6 months after doing the initial intervention with the team, you can actually get them to take the questionnaire again. Now we can see the second time around, accountability is still low, but it's improved a bit on what it was before. Accountability actually is one of the hardest ones for the teams to work on, because it means actually challenging each other. holding each other accountable for the things that they've agreed to do, and so on. And so there's no charge for a progress report, by the way. There's obviously a charge for the initial team assessment, but you can run a progress report as many times as you like with the team. And obviously the idea of that is you keep running it until you turn it green, all right? If the team leader is willing to commit to that. And why wouldn't they? There's also a personal development version of 5 behaviors, which is for individuals. And so that's really helpful in creating a team-based culture. If you want everyone in an organization to be operating by the 5 behaviors, that is to trust each other, to engage in healthy conflict, to commit to decisions, to hold each other accountable, and to focus on collective results, then there's a half-day program with a facilitator kit and some great videos that you can take everyone in an organization through this half-day program, learning how to become a better team member by operating by the 5 behaviors model, right? It's tied into their DISC profile. And so it's personalized for each person. And so then the idea of this is that people in organizations these days are typically on more than one team, all right? They might have a functional team, but they're also on a project team or some other kind of team, temporary team or something. But when they go to a team meeting, if they're aware of their own strengths and challenges in these 5 behaviors, they know what they need to work on to be a good team member during that team meeting and the interactions with that team and as the follow-up to that team meeting. Okay, so so just in summary on that, all right, the 5 behaviors team program is specifically aimed at team dysfunction and turning around into strengths, all right, whereas the personal development is focused on individual team effect. The team version creates a team credo, what we as a team need to do, and the action plans to become a cohesive team. Whereas in personal development, it can expand to the whole organization. And the 5 behaviors team version empowers one team. The personal development can empower an entire organization to create a team culture. Okay. All right. So lastly, I want to focus on the PXT Select range of products in terms of creating a healthy culture, all right? And we can think of this in the context of getting the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats. And so the PXT Select profile is mainly thought of as a selection tool because that's what it was designed for, all right? And so let's talk about job fit. Because in the PXT system, there are performance models. There's 165 performance models in the system where you can actually go and search for a particular job, if you like, and come up with a model for that particular job. And then when you start looking at candidates against that job, you can compare the person to the job and identify what the job fit is. However, and this is what the actual profile on the left looks like, all right? It's measuring cognitive skills or thinking style, right? It's measuring behavioral traits or aspects of personality, and it's measuring interest. So there's 3 separate areas it's measuring, and for each of those areas, it's got the performance model identifies what does the job require, what does the role require, and you can see in the green bars at the top there, that's what the range is required for by the job. And OC, that's Oliver. Oliver is the candidate in this case, and we can see where he sits, and you can see he's pretty strong fit in the thinking style area, and in fact, he's an overall fit of 95%. Then when we go down to the behavioral traits, we can see the teal colored bars there, again, what the job or the role requires. And then OC is where Oliver sits. So you can see there's only 66% fit overall, but there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 9 where he's outside of the performance model, okay? But some of them he's well outside the performance model, okay? And so actually you can zoom in a little bit closer on that one. And then in particular, we're going to look at decisiveness, deliberate versus bold. Okay. So then we go to the interview questions. All right. So we're going to interview Oliver about this difference between himself and the performance model on being how deliberate he is. Okay. So here is a question. Oh, sorry, there's a couple of questions there. Let me just, this is what the interviewer needs to focus on. We need to listen for his ability to make decisions more quickly when circumstances warrant it. And so there's a couple of questions there that you could ask him, and then that's what you're looking for there. But if you think about this in the context of, we've got a vacancy for a particular, someone's left the team, and we've got a vacancy in the team, and we're thinking maybe there's someone on the team who could move into that role, you know, maybe a promotion or something like that. All right, this would be a great way to look at this person. What's the job require, and is the person a good fit? Because I think sometimes the worst appointments that are made are the internal ones, where we'll give so and so a go at that job, okay, without actually going through the same process as we would if we were hiring from outside. Okay, and that's where this tool, succession planning, is a great application for this tool as well. Okay, and so there's also a coaching report for Oliver's manager, all right, which provides useful tips on how to coach him, right? So Oliver fits the performance model for assertiveness. Okay, so what do you need to know about Oliver? Okay, what his strengths are, and how he's likely to present himself, etc. And then here are some management tips for how to coach Oliver to be more effective in his role. Okay, so and bottom line, he's very direct, highly motivated, and pretty fair chance he's going to do this part of the job really well. But the other part of the profile PXT select range of products is the 360-degree assessment. And again, I brought this in here because if we're going to create the right culture, we need to make sure we've got the leadership skills to create that culture, because the leaders have a significant impact on the level of engagement of their team members, but also the culture that they're creating. Okay, the values and behaviors that the leader operates by have a significant influence on the values and behaviors of the team. And so these are the leadership or management competencies that the profile checkpoint 360 assessment actually can help leaders develop. Okay, and typical of any other 360, I haven't gone into any detail here, but you get the leader fills out the questions on themselves, their peers fill it out, their direct reports fill it out, and their manager fills it out. All right, and so you get a 360 view, and then there's coaching models and reports and everything around that. Okay, all right, so they're the three main range of products that we've got. Everything Disc, which I think most of you are familiar with to some extent. PXT Select, which you may not have been familiar with, but it's not just a selection tool. It's also very useful in succession planning and just as a coaching tool, just to help managers better understand, anyone better understand what the role requires of them, and then by behaviors, both team development and personal development. Okay, so our role is to support you in assessing your client's needs and using the Wiley/Intégro assessments. And there's our contact details, support@integro.com.au, and our toll-free number and our website. So look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.